Okay, we're going to solve two practice problems. So as you do these two problems, make sure you do it in pencil. And then as you correct your work, make sure you correct it with the pen. Also, not only you have to do it without the calculator. For these two problems, you also need to know how to use your graphing calculators to solve the solutions. So make sure when you're done, make sure you check with the graphing calculators and see if your solution is correct. So go ahead. Give yourself about 6 to 7 minutes. So let's see how you did. Let's take a look at number one first. In order to solve number one, make sure note that this has a restriction. Your solution has to be from 0 to 2 pi, including 0. So in order to solve this equation, you first need to remember how to solve 2x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 0. Do you guys remember how to factor that? Well, it's going to be quantity 2x minus 1, x minus 1 equals 0. Make sure you multiply this out and see if you get 2x squared minus 3x plus 1. So using the similar concept, you could factor that 2 sine squared theta minus 3 sine theta plus 1 is 2 sine theta minus 1 quantity sine theta minus 1 equals 0. So now you have 2 sine theta minus 1 equals 0, or sine theta minus 1 equals 0. Now how do you solve for sine theta? Well, sine theta is equal to 1 over 2. And remember, we need to solve for theta. So sine of theta equals 1 over 2. And you know that sine is positive the first and the second quadrant. So that means theta has to be pi over 6. And what is the angle from here to here? That's going to be pi minus pi over 6, which is 5 pi over 6. What about sine theta minus 1 equals 0? That's going to be sine theta equals 1. And sine of what is equal to 1? Well, that's going to be theta when theta is pi over 2. And notice, all these three angles are within the restriction. So we have three solutions. And make sure you use your graphing calculator to see if that is a solution. Now remember, when you use your graphing calculator, make sure your mode is in radian, and your answers will be in decimals instead of in terms of pi. Let's take a look at number two. Notice number two, you have cosine squared theta plus sine theta equals 2. And you have a restriction again. The problem is this is cosine theta and that's sine theta. And you want to have everything in terms of sine theta or cosine theta. So in this case, it's easier to change cosine squared theta in terms of sine theta. This is what I mean. You have sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is 1, using Pythagorean trig identity. So what is cosine squared theta? Well, cosine squared theta is 1 minus sine squared theta. So you're going to get, using substitution, you'll get 1 minus sine squared theta plus sine theta equals 2. And you get negative sine squared theta plus sine theta minus 1 equals 0. I don't like the negative in front of sine squared theta, so I'm going to multiply everything by a negative. So you get this. Now, if you try to factor this out, there's no way you could factor it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the quadratic formula. So instead of x, we have to put sine theta equals negative. Okay, first of all, what is A? A is 1. What is B? -1, and C is 1. So negative times -1 plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So it's going to be 1 plus or minus square root of 1 minus 4 all over 2, which is going to be 1 plus or minus radical -3 all over 2. Now notice, the discriminant is -3. So what happens? First of all, radical -3 is imaginary. So that means you do not have a real solution. Okay? So the answer is no real solutions. So what does it mean graphically? When you graph this, when you graph that as your y1, and when you graph that as your y2, what's going to happen? That means you are not going to find any intersection points. I'm sure you noticed that when you graph these two using your graphing calculator. So number 2, there's no real solutions. So this is what I mean when I say use your graphing calculator to check your answers. You first want to graph quantity cosine x squared plus sine x, and then for your y2, graph 2. If there's a solution, there's going to be intersection points. If not, then there's no real solutions. So make sure when you graph this, your window, your x min is 0, and your x max is 2 pi, because we have a restriction. So let's see what happens when you graph this. Notice, there's no intersection points. That's why we have no real solutions.